Hi everyone, this is Dr Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Rightio, today we're talking about postural feeding or variable feeding positions, or feed to form as we call it in the equine functional posture course. How are you today, Sophie?
Very well. Very well. Keen for this episode. It is one of my favorite topics actually in the course. Yep, I really love seeing how it's received, and yeah, it's definitely a fave for me, and I think a favorite for a lot of people who come through.
I agree. Like we've definitely seen some huge differences in horses' postures, like just by implementing this without, doing much of anything else. Like in some instances they couldn't, for different reasons or time or weather, when it's been really rainy in New Zealand, and just how much change this has created. And I think people find it really fun because they can see things.
Yeah.
And they're obvious things that they can see. So, and we're going to talk about that. But I think that's what, some other things are a bit hard. Like you can't see it because you're doing it. You can't see it because it takes time to change. Different reasons why other things can be a little bit more challenging. Whereas this one, like you can start to see how it's influencing your horse really quickly.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. So my first introduction, and I think a lot of why we even talk about this is because of Dr. Sharon May Davis. So she was a mentor of mine, and she taught me about Hey Hi. That was what we initially called it a lot back. Oh, like it would be at least 10 years ago now, probably longer. And yeah, I remember talking and I remember implementing it with clients, and sometimes I made horses sore because I didn't implement it. I just went straight to the like, hey, hi, and I was like, yeah, we have to do this. And then the horse was like, I've never stood like that before. And so I learned, okay, we need to like do it gradually. But it's something I'm still implementing, and it's something I implement with my own horses, and we're going to about some of our own experiences. But the first thing to realize, because a lot of people will say, but horses are designed to graze and they should only eat off the ground. So what do we say about that?
There's more to it than just that, because horses have evolved over time and we're mainly viewing them in domestic environments, and we have learned that there is value from eating from the ground a lot of the day, but 20%, up to 20% of horses in natural uncontrolled environments browse from higher positions, anywhere between knee height to wither, or I've seen horses go higher actually, I'll talk about them in a minute, but that there's a lot more variability in a horse's natural movement states out in the wild.
Yeah, and obviously it depends where they live, right?
Yeah.
What foods are available to them. So my first experience with, essentially horses that aren't domesticated was with the Konings in the Netherlands. And I got to observe them, in the environment and what they did. So we watched them, I don't know how long we were there, an hour, I don't know. But it was so interesting, how much they moved. So they would go from grazing over, so there was prickly bushes that they were browsing in, and they'd walk from there, and then they go back to grazing, then they'd walk over there, and the interesting thing was, and I have a lot of pictures from and videos, is that they stood browsing at the bush, and their head was like neutral or a bit higher than neutral, so they had a choice, right? Like the bushes were like bushy bushes. They were square. They had the most amazing rotation in their upper neck, and their connection of their head to their upper neck. Like, I just don't see that in domestic horses. Like, they often look a little bit tucked back in their ability to rotate. They just don't do much in extension, like with their nose out. We don't ride them like that. We don't feed them like that. They're just not using that range of motion. They also grazed square or either front foot forward, and neither front foot was any more forward than the other. And they walked and grazed, and the movement from grazing flowed through their entire body. So you see like this gentle oscillation occurring all the way to their hind foot and their tail. Like, you know, just that gentle motion of eating translated through their entire body, which is how it should be. Like, if the body is not restricted, there will be a flow. You know, Chinese medicine talk about it as the qi, but like the fascia is all able to kind of, you know, be hydrated and work along its entire system, which it covers the entire body. So like those conics for me were a life-changing event, and I got videos of that. But then we dissected them, not all of them, obviously, just the ones that were being euthanized for well-being purposes. But we got to dissect them. That was mind-blowing, because I'd done a few dissection with Sharon already. So I'd seen domesticated horses. I'd seen some of the issues that they have. With these horses, they had the most well-developed postural muscles, specifically the psoas and the abdominals. They had massive bellies, but their backs were so strong. And the psoas muscle was, I've never seen another psoas muscle like that ever. It was plump, it was full, it wasn't tight or weak looking. Like, it looked like a healthy, functioning muscle.
Yeah.
And that supports the ability of the horse to push with the hind legs. It supports the ability of the hips to flex, the lumbosacral joint to flex. Like, it's so important. And, you know, we've talked about the psoas in other episodes, but like, yeah, it was crazy. And the abdominals were so thick. Like, they were just amazingly developed. And they're just developing in response to loading. Like, they're muscles. They respond to how they're being loaded. And yeah, so that was really cool. What about your experience?
So my first experiences were really hearing about variable feeding positions from you while doing my degree. That was quite eye-opening. It wasn't something that I'd ever learned about or considered before. But since then, I've had a couple, quite a lot of instances where I've seen change, and there are two that were quite profound. One was a horse that I was doing body work on, 3 horses that, despite the fact that they had a few injuries and scars and things, they had really good spinal and pelvic motion, and they didn't need a lot of help to find balance. You know, they were quite functional all over. And when we opened the gate at the end of that bodywork session, all 3 horses walked out, and they went straight up to this great big clump of bamboo, and they stood perfectly square, reached up like giraffes. It's honestly the highest feeding position I've ever seen. And they just lengthened with this beautiful, straight, stretched motion and ate bamboo leaves. And then in a very controlled fashion, then brought their head back down and ate the leaf, and then they went back up and they ate some more and came back down. And I actually think that that one exercise that they would engage in, she said, oh, yeah, they eat a bit, every day. It was near a septic tank, actually. So it was incredibly productive, that bamboo tree. It was making a massive difference to their ability. And she has, and they were all 17, 19, and maybe I think 21. They were
Yeah.
older horses, and I was impressed. And I think that was a major contributor to them.
Yeah.
And the other profound experience for me was that I've been very lucky where I am. After a couple of good summers, I've had grass in the paddock that's been up to my horse's shoulder and wither height. And I've never seen them in such incredible condition over a summer when I was doing nothing with them but their feet and their bodies, their neck, their top line, and the motion of their rib cage and belly from like reaching out, grabbing a bit, tugging it off, and their head bobbing up and down. It was just incredible what it did for their body. Really
Yeah,
incredible.
and it's really interesting because what I've noticed is when horses have the opportunity, they will choose to do it. So
Yeah,
like and I saw like a client's horse last night on Facebook, she shared a picture and walking past a tree and the horse is like giraffe, reaching up for the leaves. And I've seen that so many times where if they have the opportunity, they will look up. Like it's not like they don't think of it because they do naturally, whether like it's something they just do.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it needs to be included, and especially when we have over here, especially in Australia, like we have a lot of paddocks without many hedges and things like that they can browse on. Like we just have grass paddocks a lot of the time, or we have, maybe gum trees or, trees that are not horse friendly in terms of eating them. And so they don't have that opportunity. But like I know Sharon tells a story about her last ridden horse, and she said how beautifully square that horse stood and how she got accolades for her great riding of that horse. And she said it took a while. She thought, oh, I'm such a good rider, and then after a while she realized no, her horse had natural postural balance because it was browsing on these hedges. And so she realized it wasn't just um her riding abilities, it was actually the horse had developed that postural strength. Um, so
fantastic.
when I first learned about it, I had some clients do it, and one of my first experiences was, so I can't remember how long we'd done it with this particular horse for, but I don't know, it might have been 6 weeks or something. Like it wasn't a long time yet. Anyway, she went to a dressage training day, and the judge got out of the car, and she'd seen this horse before, and she said, what have you done with your horse? Like that was the straightest center line that I have seen in a very long time. And she was like, oh well, he gets body work, but we also look at his feeding positions and stuff. So
Wow.
that was pretty cool, because then it just showed that it was having a positive influence on the horse's performance. But as we've talked about in a lot of the podcasts so far, like if you have an influence on the horse's posture, balance, and you can help them be more balanced in movement, you have an influence on their emotional regulation
Absolutely. Yeah.
and their ability to respond to their environment.
Yes, definitely. What are the kinds of things that people can incorporate that make up variable feeding postures?
Yeah, so some of the things, like obviously hay high was one of them, and we'll talk a bit about the pros and cons of hay nets in a second. So putting the hay at nose height and then moving it up between ears and eye height, so that promotes that kind of stretching upwards and that rotation. You can do things like putting it at different heights on tires. So we in the posture course, functional posture course in module 2, is it? 3. We have feed to form. And a lot of the times we're getting people to put their feeders on tires. You can put them on fences, but just be mindful you get a different posture we've found when you put it on, and I'm talking on the same side of a gate, when you put it on hang it on something as opposed to putting it on tires at the same height. I think it creates a different perception with the limbs. You can have them reaching over the gate, so that really gets a lift through the base of their neck. What other ones?
You can use hills, so an incline or a decline. You know, some people have ramps, some people have an incline in their paddock or a place like that where they can some we've seen people in the course who from a very small incline have had a change, or and then others who've put them, you know, in a ditch and they've just seen you know, and I think there was one person who did that for a week and then came back to a small incline and it had totally shifted
Yeah.
for her horse for different reasons. So, and of course, there's some decline, you know, there's lots of different positions that you can put them in.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is like how we're seeing quite a big difference with sometimes small amounts of time. Like even 5 to 10 minutes seems to make a big difference. And I guess if the body has a opportunity to stand in a position where it's more balanced, you know, so where where the brain is in a more balanced position, where the spinal cord is in a more balanced position, and feel that, like that neural input that is coming from that position is quite profound, because the body is always, you know, that's the most efficient balanced place, right? The body wants to be in that place, but a lot of the times it can't find that. So using things like feeding positions to help find that can have quite a profound effect on the nervous system, even for really short periods of time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it never fails to amaze me either in a bodywork session or, you know, with these feeding postures, just how quickly the nervous system absorbs and takes on those positive influences.
Yeah, especially if it's got that bit of time to rest, which might be, you know, that it reaches up for something and then goes to neutral. Like they have an option, they're not stuck in that position. So they can grab, if it's too difficult, they can grab food um and then not have to stay in that position.
Yeah.
So other people, and we'll come back to the hay nets in a minute, but I've heard other comments in the past that, you know, it'll have a detrimental effect on the feet, it'll have a detrimental effect on the teeth because horses are supposed to graze. I don't know if you've had any experience with that.
I definitely have been privileged to people saying that, you know, their jaw motion in their horse has really improved, or the mouth has been able to soften. You know, the horse is less likely to grind their teeth. When and certainly I've noticed, particularly with foals, when you have a little look at their mouth, like the position of the incisors against one another changes with the head in a lower position to a higher position. And what we know, if you know, if horses are naturally browsing or involved in other positions during times of their day, it's beneficial for the mouth to move in lots of different directions. It's good for the tongue and the hyoid to be moving in different ways, and very good for the TMJ as well.
Yeah, which is
Found that.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. And so recently I got my horse's teeth done. And I was kind of like, oh, like like Henry and Jelly have been, you know, they probably have less time grazing because they're they're not on grass, so they're just, how I feed them is how they get their feed, right? So when I'm out for the day, generally they need to have a lot of hay nets, and I put them at a lot of variable heights. So they spend a lot of time effectively browsing. Like for them, it would actually be more than 20% probably. And so I thought, oh, this will be interesting. So got their teeth done. Henry's nothing, yeah, nothing much. Pretty good. And Jelly, she was like, oh, this mouth is great, so balanced. And so I was like, okay, well then there's the point right there. And I had another client's horse who's done the equine functional posture course, and I've treated the horse, and she had the same experience. The dentist came and said, like, this mouth is so balanced. So, yeah, it's from anecdotal evidence, like it's a misconception that it will have a negative impact on teeth and feet. You know, unless
Yeah.
horses have got restrictions, you know, and they're doing stuff in a way of brace, you know, so they're always like going to one side, or, and obviously I'm doing postural work with Jelly as well, but if they're always eating in the variable feeding position in an awkward position, well, yes, it's going to have a detrimental effect on their teeth and their feet.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I was just like, when you're talking about the feet, obviously you've got loading, from left to right as well. And sometimes you see horses who will use their rib cage, they'll rotate it one way more than the other, or um they're inclined to rotate in a direction, or one elbow is really stuck into the body, or they've got asymmetrical scapular heights sometimes. I definitely see when horses are engaging in postural motion, sometimes it's a little bit stiff, but it loosens up quite like really valuably. And I've also seen in my own horses that when I have had a warm up and then they've come into the postural feeding, it's even more exaggerated. Just in a case, and of course you're going to find value either way, but it just really clicked for me just how, the body has so much motion there when doing all of those movements, reaching out, coming back in,
Yeah.
and changing between each step. And I was just thinking, I've always noticed, the sort of like almost a bouncing and a
Yeah.
lifting of the back and bouncing of the belly and the abdominals, where the head goes up and the head goes down. And what you were
Yeah.
saying about the conigs and the tone and level of muscle they had in their abdominals.
Yeah, and guess what? By doing that motion, they're probably building their multifidi, the
Yes, of course.
postural stabilizers. So, you
Yeah.
know, the studies are yet to be done in that, but and obviously they've still got to have, you know, if you're putting a horse's back always into extension and they've got problems in there, well, that's not necessarily going to be the best position for them. So you want to determine the best position, you know, depending on your horse's posture. So it's not like every horse should be have a feeding position at, you know, at a height of whatever.
I
Like,
Yeah, eye at hip level, say.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that. And the way that we do it in the module is that people look at their horse's posture, they look at their strengths and weaknesses in that posture. They look at things like how swayed is their back? You know, do they have a top line? Are they using their core already? Do they always stand you know, with their forelimbs split or their hind limbs split, or you know, are they showing a big imbalances left to right,
Yeah.
or from the top line to the bottom to the ventral line? So, you know, people look at that, they look at their horse from an individual perspective, and then they tailor the feeding position to create the most comfortable, neutral looking posture for that horse. So the point at which the horse appears to be most comfortable in the most balanced way. So, you know, there's more even loading from left to right, from front to back, more even, you know, alignment of the limbs relative to the body, that sort of things. And you know, what kind of positions have people found the most valuable that we've noticed in the course?
So it depends on the horse. You know, lots of different horses have come in and they'll have areas of tension or limb placement that's never symmetrical or something like that. And people have used positions that there's been some people who just have looked for any improvement. You know, they've just had to start really small. It's just a little bit better than the normal position for the horse. And that might look like um, being on a very mild incline and the food propped up on tires in front of the horse there. So they don't actually have to reach very far, but it's just a very small motion. And when it's come up to, you know, chest or knee or whatever level, the horse naturally finds a square two front feet, which they would never normally do. Or they stop picking up their leg and pawing, which a
Yeah.
lot of people report is an issue, or they'll shift behind on their back feet. Other people have progressed to doing things like feeding over the gate to lift the base of the neck, but that's really something that needs to be monitored, and it's good to get feedback from somebody who knows what they're doing if you're going to engage with that one, because you can also create brace and tension.
Yeah, and that one takes time to develop for some
Yeah.
horses, depending if they've ever used the base of their neck. Like I
Yep.
know for Patch, the pony that I had, I couldn't feed her over something or even very high for like over 6 months because she had such a low like neck set and her thoracic sling just hadn't worked for such a long time. So it took a fair while. Like we got her there and she lifted beautifully, you know, through the base of her neck. There was a big difference in that area. But if I went there straight away, I just saw the tension through her back and her limb placement.
Yeah. We've seen people who've gone to a very high position for a few days, and it was just interesting to see their horse actually found a square and a better position with a higher head posture, and then
Yeah.
after that they were able to come down because the body adjusts, and those, you know, a week of stretching in emotion really, you know, has unloaded parts of the body, and then they've come back down more
And
balanced
lengthened and
and
lengthened.
lengthened. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And other people have found that they've always fed high, and going lower made a difference for their horse to be at knee height. So there really is, like you said, no rule book. It's about evaluating the horse in front of you and being creative. I'm very grateful that tire places give out tires for free
Yeah.
most of the time.
Tires are very useful, except you do have to be careful horses don't get their legs caught in them, as we had that experience as well. Um, so yeah, tires, trees, basketball hoops, like the basketball hoops that you can put water in and stabilizing them to a fence. Um, I've used those before. I've had people rig up actual like feeding stations in their paddock where they've concreted in a pole and then put different heights that they can get their hay net up to. So there's lots of ways to do it. It can also be used in rehab. So at the what's it called? Barefoot Blacksmith at Yark. Yeah.
Yep.
So they, as part of their laminitic horse rehab, they have ramps and the horses are on a ramp feeding kind of over and down a little bit. And they're kind of getting a lot of bang for their buck there. Like they're getting lengthening through the tendons of the back of the limb, which generally contract with laminitis. Helping with alignment of the pedal bone because the pedal bone in the foot has rotated that way. Like, sorry, you can't see what I'm saying, but has rotated downwards. And so they're putting him on a ramp, which also helps like with that alignment of the pedal bone. It helps their back and their whole posture because obviously horses that have had chronic laminitis get a lot of tension through their top line from that constant like pulling off specifically their front feet. So yeah, they've been doing it for quite a long time now, and they built a special system for that. the other one I had was actually a friend's horse that had a traumatic tendon injury where he severed the superficial digital flexor, and it was greater than 50% severed. So the vet was like, I don't know what's going to happen here, like, but she was willing to let the owner give it a go, which was good. The owner is a vet nurse and a nail body worker, and she was also willing to do whatever it took. So throughout that rehab program, straight away he had variable feeding positions within his comfort to promote. And I've done this with other rehab cases, like, you know, the one thing we can do in a rehab case, you might not be able to move them, but you can promote even loading through those feeding positions. And so you've got to figure out the feeding position for that. So that was part of his stall rest. It was his feeding position. And then he progressed to actually being on a ramp. And then he chose on the ramp to reach up and there was a tree. So he chose to stand on the ramp and reach up and browse. So he got, like, again, extra bang for his buck because
Yeah.
he's getting the stretch through the tendons, which this was quite far in his rehab program. And he was getting like a full body stretch, you know, through all of the
Opening
neck.
of the ventral space.
Yeah, and like, so he fully recovered, and which was amazing, like a credit to her dedication, because it took a hell of a lot. But yeah, so it can be used everyday postural work, rehab, um, and yeah, just like as part of your program.
Yeah.
What about the use of hay nets?
So there's a few different things to think about. Of course, hay nets have been around for a long time and they've added a lot of value to people's ability to slow down their horse's intake of food and, um, increase the foraging time for horses, which has been incredible for, ulcers and people who can't get out to their horse all day. Um, there's a few different things to consider. There are pictures on the internet of people with hay nets that are hung in the middle of a stable, so they're swinging around. And then there's hay nets that, attach to the wall or that you take away, fill up, tie back to the wall. And there's lots of different things to consider. One is that a hay bag put against the wall is one that a horse can press into, so it adds a lot more stability and there's less need for a horse, to really over exaggerate movements. Whereas a swinging hay net, if you haven't seen one, it actually sort of like, it's very hard for the horse to put pressure on to dig their teeth in and grab a piece of hay out. So they're working very hard, and I personally think that exercise is better for hay nets that have a slightly bigger, if your horse was advanced enough that you were going to use that technique, it needs to be a hay net that has bigger holes, because otherwise it's quite frustrating for the horse. It's
Yeah.
not very rewarding and they have to work very hard. And also you would be creating a lot of tension if the horse is swinging really far forward, really far back for hours on end.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great progression, but when we say progression, it's probably, you know, when they've been doing variable feeding positions for like 6 to 12 months, really. And you know that they've kind of really developed their postural strength and their ability of variation within that postural strength. But yeah, I often say, like, with people, you know, it's really hard, right? Like, I find it really hard with my horses because um they they get fat really easily. They're not on grass. I'm responsible for their feeding requirements. And if I don't put it in a hay net, obviously they eat it pretty quickly. But, you know, there's a lot of cons to the hay nets in terms of them, if it's on the ground even, you know, they're pulling, and if it's up higher, they're pulling. And so, you know, now they handle them quite well, and a lot of horses are expert hay net eaters. But for some horses that have especially physical pain restrictions, imbalances can be extremely challenging. And so generally when I'm starting to use hay nets for variable feeding, I will say, always give them an easy option first. So I just, like my horses I don't put their lucerne in the hay net. So they get free, you know, when they have their little bit of lucerne, it's free. They don't have to work for that. So it's just reducing the strain because obviously they love lucerne. So I say always give them something free so that they're not hungry and, you know, fighting the hay net. Then the second thing is that I'll generally start with a bigger hold hay net or a hay bag or a feeder, you know, those hay feeders that they can get the hay out of pretty easily, but you can still hang them in different heights. And yeah, you might, if you need to provide a net, you choose the time at which you provide a net, and you think about how it's affecting your horse's body. And you also monitor that they're not always eating that hay net in a certain position. So the interesting thing I see is Henry decides his position. So he gets to choose his optimal position, which is what I would like Jelly to be in. Jelly sometimes will eat in an awkward position so that he doesn't get in trouble from Henry. So that's not, you know, you've got to keep that in mind, because if Jelly's always compromising himself a little bit, then I'm not getting the benefit that I'm aiming for from that. So you need to look at how does your horse eat the hay net, and if it's in with another horse, what's the dynamics there? Because that can have a huge impact on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that comes up, of course, is the influence of the hay nets on teeth. I personally use hay nets without knots, and I've found, to be sure, I haven't seen it personally. I've just seen pictures, you know, that have circulated where horses have had a little knot get tucked in a spot of their tooth, either that's, you know, got a little chip, or it's sit between and it's pulled a tooth out, or there's been some kind of damage to the gum or the tooth. I also have had an experience where Overfly, a horse that I owned, he had trouble with his incisors. So he had one on the top that was missing and one beside it that was a bit damaged. And he was a horse who always picked up his food predominantly out of his bucket with his lips. And he found hay bags were very frustrating and very difficult, and he wasn't interested even if there was very high value hay. He also had some physical restrictions, but it was hard. And so I cut in big holes so that he could participate. And when the holes were big enough, he would engage with the hay net, and he found it a lot easier. But I also have one horse who's like a pro at the hay net. So he'll empty a small hole hay net very quickly. And he just, finds it very easy. He moves it with his tongue and he, finds it easy. But it's important to think about your horse's incisors, because they're the teeth that they need to pull it out of the net. Have you had another experience with?
I mean, Mooney's a windsucker, so his incisors are pretty sensitive, so I never give him a hay net. He just won't bother. And I think when they won't bother, there's a reason. However, early on, I had him out of a hay bag because he used to have his knee would always bend. And it was because he had quite traumatic pectoral injuries. And so I fed him at the top of a round yard in a hay bag and I can't remember how long it took, but it really wasn't long. And his knee straightened up and he never ever buckled again. And so that sold me on postural feeding, because I wasn't doing any other work with him at that moment, just feeding just one hay bag a day at that height. So yeah, there's so many advantages, and it's considering those, and I think it's definitely an important part of a rehab program, but also, you know, a part of just your horse's functional posture. And you know, we were talking about it before, and like we said in our functional posture course, like people have fun doing this. Like they really enjoy it because they can really see the difference in their horses. they're engaging with their horses. And they like, it's a form of enrichment for the horses if it's not creating stress. So that's, you want to be able to observe signs of stress, know if it's creating stress for your horse, and what that looks like for your individual horse, and make sure it is a form of enrichment rather than stress. Anything else you want to add as a...
No, it's just I really think that it's a great thing. It's definitely something that if you can take a little bit of time to set yourself up with a position, it takes minimal time and effort. So really anybody can use it consistently, because even if you only have time to throw your horse their food or their hay bag, it just means that every day you don't even have to be there. It saves time and your horse is doing a little bit of a postural activity. So, and consistency and regularity is very valuable to posture. And it's also, even though it's an activity, it's a space for observation and progress. So observing your horse, how do they stand? And then just noticing, like, do they stand different from their bucket in the paddock? Do they
Yeah.
stand, are you seeing them a little bit more square when they're out and about or grazing differently? It's a great starting point as an observation.
Yeah, and it can also go the other way. Like, if you know how your horse usually eats that in that variable feeding position, and you see that they're resting a limb, offloading a limb, putting their head in a different position, standing in a different position, that's also information where
Yeah,
you can pick up a problem before it potentially, before you go out and have that ride that felt like crap. You can go, oh, hang on, he's resting that leg. Like, he never rests that leg. Or he's doing the hay net real awkward today. And so you'll pick up things sooner than what you would have. Um, just yeah, through the observation. And ultimately you want to get to a place where you can move the feeding positions in all different places, and the horse is able to adapt and still maintain a posture that looks balanced. Like, even though they're in all different positions, it doesn't look awkward or uncomfortable. So yeah, it's just so valuable, and just consider how you can do that, or come do the equine functional posture course, and then you can
exactly.
get the support in development. So I think that will finish us up there. So thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast discussing variable feeding positions. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes. And find the links to our socials in the comments. And remember to join the next Equine Functional Posture course to continue to create transformation in your journey. Thank you.
See you all in the next exciting episode.